Horror movies are known for their high body counts and bleak endings. But what about those characters who manage to cheat death against all odds? Today, we're counting down 13 characters who survived horror movies by a miracle. From last-minute rescues to unexpected twists, these characters defied the odds and lived to tell the tale. What's even more fascinating is that these characters' survival often hinges on factors beyond their control. Maybe it's a lucky coincidence, a miscalculation by the villain, or even a plot twist that changes the game. Whatever the reason, these characters' stories are a thrilling reminder that even in the darkest of horror movies, anything can happen. So buckle up and let's dive into our list of 13 characters who survived horror movies by a miracle. From iconic franchises to hidden gems, we're exploring it all. Sally Hardisty's survival story stands as one of horror's most harrowing escapes. After her brother Franklin and their friends decide to investigate her grandfather's old homestead, they stumble upon a family of cannibalistic killers. One by one, Sally watches her companions fall victim to Leatherface and his deranged family. What makes her survival particularly miraculous is the psychological torture she endures. During the infamous dinner scene, she's tied to a chair, tormented by the family, and forced to watch their grotesque behavior. Her escape involves multiple stages. She breaks free from her restraints, leaps through a second-story window, sustaining significant injuries, and runs through dense brush while being pursued by Leatherface and his chainsaw. Even after reaching the highway, she has to dodge multiple attacks before finally being rescued by a passing truck driver. The image of her laughing hysterically in the back of the pickup truck as Leatherface swings his chainsaw in frustrated rage has become iconic in horror cinema. Jamie Lee Curtis's portrayal of Laurie Strode set the standard for horror movie survival. As a babysitter in Haddonfield, Illinois, Laurie starts the day like any other, going to school, making plans with friends, and preparing for a quiet night of babysitting. What makes her survival remarkable is how she transforms from an ordinary teenager into a resourceful fighter. Throughout the night, she faces Michael Myers multiple times, each encounter more dangerous than the last. She creates weapons from knitting needles, coat hangers, and kitchen knives. When cornered in a closet, she fashions a makeshift spear from a wire hanger. Her most impressive feat comes when protecting the children in her care, Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace. Despite her terror, she keeps them calm and hidden while facing down one of horror's most relentless killers. Even after being strangled, stabbed, and thrown downstairs, she maintains the presence of mind to get the children to safety and continues fighting back. Her survival is made even more impressive by the fact that she had no special training or preparation, just raw survival instinct and quick thinking. Bruce Campbell's Ash Williams went from a mild-mannered smart employee to one of horror's most beloved survivors. His ordeal begins during a peaceful vacation at a remote cabin with his girlfriend Linda, sister Cheryl, and friends. After finding the Necronomicon, Book of the Dead, and playing a recorded incantation, all hell breaks loose, literally. What makes Ash's survival extraordinary is the escalating nature of his torment. He's forced to battle his possessed friends one by one, including his own sister and girlfriend. The psychological toll of having to kill loved ones would break most people, but Ash's most miraculous survival comes when fighting his own possessed hand. After being bitten, he's forced to amputate his own hand with a chainsaw, then replace it with the same tool to continue fighting. Throughout the night, he endures possession, physical assault, and psychological warfare from demons who take the forms of his friends and loved ones. His ability to maintain any semblance of sanity while facing these horrors, let alone survive them, is remarkable. The fact that he emerges not just alive, but with his signature dark humor intact makes his survival even more impressive. Heather Langenkamp's Nancy Thompson faces a unique challenge in horror survival, staying awake. As a teenager discovering that dreams can kill, Nancy's battle against Freddy Krueger requires her to outthink a supernatural enemy who can strike at her most vulnerable moments. Her survival is particularly impressive because she has to master both the real world and the dream world. She sets up elaborate traps in her house, including tripwires and explosive booby traps. But her most clever strategy is learning to bring things back from her dreams, a skill she discovers after taking Freddy's hat and uses later to pull him into reality. Throughout her ordeal, she loses her best friend Tina, her boyfriend Glenn, and nearly her sanity as sleep deprivation takes its toll. She also has to contend with disbelieving adults, including her alcoholic mother, who tries to stop her from investigating Freddy's history. Nancy's survival comes through a combination of research, preparation, and the ability to turn Freddy's own powers against him. Her final confrontation, where she defeats Freddy by turning her back on him and declaring him powerless, shows remarkable psychological strength. Neve Campbell's Sidney Prescott stands out even among horror survivors for the sheer number of times she's overcome death. Her story begins with the murder of her mother, which becomes the catalyst for the first Ghostface killings. What makes Sidney's survival particularly miraculous is that she faces new killers in each film, each with different motives and methods. In the first film alone, she survives multiple attacks, including a brutal assault in her own home, a party massacre, and a final confrontation where she discovers her boyfriend Billy is one of the killers. Her survival skills evolve with each encounter. She learns to never trust a seemingly dead body, always check behind doors, and never assume she knows who's behind the mask. Throughout the series, she loses countless friends, family members, and romantic interests, yet maintains her humanity and ability to form connections. Perhaps most impressively, she manages to maintain a relatively normal life between attacks, showing remarkable psychological resilience. Her survival toolkit includes physical combat skills, technological awareness, especially regarding phones and security systems, and an almost superhuman ability to sense when something isn't right. Dwayne Jones's portrayal of Ben represents one of horror's most complex survival stories. As an African-American man in 1960s rural Pennsylvania, Ben faces both the zombie apocalypse and the era's racial tensions. His survival through most of the film is remarkable for several reasons. First, he's the only character who maintains a clear head throughout the crisis, boarding up windows and organizing defense strategies while others panic. He survives multiple zombie attacks, power struggles with Harry Cooper, who wants everyone to hide in the basement, and the psychological strain of watching other survivors succumb to either zombies or their own fears. Ben's practical thinking helps him survive. He uses fire, physical barriers, and strategic planning to keep the zombies at bay. He also shows exceptional leadership skills, trying to keep the group united despite their differences. What makes his story particularly poignant is that after surviving an entire night of zombie attacks, he's mistakenly shot by a police posse clearing the area. His tale serves as both a horror survival story and a powerful social commentary. Daniel Kaluuya's Chris Washington faces a uniquely modern horror scenario that makes his survival all the more impressive. As a talented photographer visiting his white girlfriend's family for the first time, Chris's initial discomfort with subtle racial microaggressions evolves into a fight for survival against a cult that transplants white people's consciousness into black bodies. His survival is miraculous for several reasons. First, he overcomes not just physical threats, but also sophisticated psychological manipulation. The Armitage family uses hypnosis, gaslighting, and social pressure to try to control him. Chris's survival depends on his ability to resist these mental attacks while maintaining enough presence of mind to plan his escape. His photography background proves crucial. His camera flash becomes a weapon against hypnosis, and his observant nature helps him piece together the conspiracy. He survives being strapped to a chair for the procedure, fights off multiple attackers, and escapes despite being heavily outnumbered. His final escape involves using cotton stuffing from a chair to block out hypnotic commands, showing remarkable resourcefulness under extreme pressure. Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley sets the standard for sci-fi horror survival. As a warrant officer aboard the commercial space tug Nostromo, Ripley's survival is remarkable because she's fighting an unknown entity in the confined space of a spaceship. Her ordeal begins when the crew investigates a distress signal and encounters the xenomorph. What makes her survival particularly impressive is her adherence to protocols despite pressure from her crewmates. When she refuses to let Kane back on board with a facehugger attached, she's following quarantine procedures that could have saved the crew. Throughout the film, she maintains her composure while watching her colleagues die in increasingly horrific ways. Her final confrontation with the alien demonstrates extraordinary resourcefulness. She uses the ship's systems against it, opens the airlock, and manages to survive in space. Perhaps most impressively, she remembers to rescue the ship's cat, Jones, showing she retains her humanity even in extreme circumstances. Her survival comes through a combination of quick thinking, technical knowledge, and physical capability. Shauna Macdonald's Sarah Carter survives one of horror's most claustrophobic ordeals. After losing her husband and daughter in a car accident, she joins 5 friends on a caving expedition that goes horribly wrong. Her survival is miraculous because she faces multiple threats simultaneously: the physical dangers of cave exploration, the psychological trauma of her recent loss, betrayal by her friend Juno, and attacks from humanoid cave creatures. What makes her survival particularly impressive is how she transforms from a traumatized victim into a fierce survivor. When the group becomes trapped after a cave-in, Sarah must overcome her claustrophobia and fear of the dark. She navigates through incredibly tight spaces, fights off multiple creatures, and deals with the discovery that Juno had an affair with her late husband. Her survival requires both physical endurance, climbing, swimming through underground pools, fighting, and psychological resilience. By the end, she's covered in blood and forced to make brutal choices to stay alive, showing how far a person can go when pushed to absolute limits. Lupita Nyong'o's Adelaide Wilson faces a unique survival challenge, fighting her own doppelganger. Her story begins with a childhood trauma at a beach funhouse where she encountered her double, but the true horror unfolds years later when she returns to Santa Cruz with her family. What makes her survival miraculous is the complexity of her situation. She must protect her family from their own doubles while grappling with suppressed memories and a growing realization about her own identity. Her ballet training becomes crucial to her survival, allowing her to anticipate and match her double's movements in their final confrontation. Throughout the film, she demonstrates exceptional protective instincts, managing to keep her family alive while other families fall victim to their doppelgangers. The revelation that she is actually the original tethered person who switched places with the real Adelaide as a child adds another layer to her survival story. She's been fighting to maintain her stolen life all along. Her ability to overcome both physical threats and existential horror makes her survival particularly impressive. Fran Kranz's Marty Mikulski offers a unique take on horror survival. As the stereotypical stoner character, he's typically the type to die early in horror films. However, his paranoid nature and tendency to question everything makes him one of only 2 survivors. What makes his survival miraculous is how he sees through the manipulation of the facility controlling their fate. While his friends fall into predetermined horror movie roles due to chemical and psychological manipulation, Marty's marijuana use inadvertently protects him from the facility's mind-altering drugs. He discovers hidden cameras, questions suspicious behavior, and ultimately finds the elevator system that leads to the truth. His survival requires him to overcome not just physical threats, but also a massive conspiracy designed to sacrifice him and his friends to ancient gods. Throughout the film, he faces zombies, various monsters, and facility personnel, surviving through a combination of luck, paranoid awareness, and unconventional thinking. His refusal to follow horror movie tropes literally saves his life multiple times. Kurt Russell's R.J. MacReady survives one of horror's most paranoid scenarios. As a helicopter pilot at an Antarctic research station, MacReady faces a shape-shifting alien that can perfectly imitate any living organism. His survival is remarkable because he must maintain his sanity while never being able to trust anyone, including himself. What makes his situation particularly dire is the combination of extreme isolation, harsh weather conditions, and the psychological strain of constant suspicion. MacReady develops innovative ways to test who might be infected, including the famous blood test scene. His survival depends on his ability to think strategically while under immense pressure, maintain leadership when the group begins to fracture, and make difficult decisions about who to trust. He survives multiple confrontations with the Thing in various forms, each requiring different tactics. By the end, he's forced to destroy the entire station to prevent the Thing from reaching civilization, showing his ability to make sacrifices for the greater good. Mia Goth's Maxine Mink survives a uniquely personal horror in X and its prequel Pearl. As an aspiring adult film actress in the 1970s, she encounters Pearl, an elderly woman with a disturbing past and homicidal tendencies. What makes Maxine's survival extraordinary is how she must understand and outmaneuver a killer who sees in her a reflection of her own lost youth. Throughout her ordeal, she witnesses the brutal deaths of her friends and boyfriend, yet maintains enough composure to play psychological games with Pearl. Her survival requires her to tap into her performance skills, playing along with Pearl's delusions while looking for an opportunity to escape. The fact that she's the only survivor of the group shows her exceptional ability to read and respond to her situation. Her final confrontation with Pearl becomes a battle of wills as much as physical survival, with Maxine ultimately emerging as the sole survivor through a combination of quick thinking, physical capability, and psychological resilience. Each of these survivors reminds us that in horror movies, survival often comes down to a perfect storm of quick thinking, resourcefulness, and plain old luck. Their stories continue to inspire and terrify audiences, showing that even in the darkest situations, survival is possible, if only by a miracle. What makes these particular survivors stand out is not just that they lived, but how they managed to maintain their humanity while facing unimaginable horrors. Their tales serve as masterclasses in survival, demonstrating that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in physical prowess, but in the ability to adapt, think clearly under pressure, and never give up hope, even when all seems lost.